Welcome to the Ripcord Moment. I'm your host, Joe C2. Today we're joined by Daan Renssen. He's the owner of PrideStaff. PrideStaff is an award-winning, full-service staffing and recruiting company with over 85 offices in the United States. Daan's office is responsible for serving the Northwest Los Angeles County region and the Ventura County here in the greater Los Angeles area. In 2013, Daan chased his dream, his American dream, of leaving his corporate position and starting his own company. He opened his first PrideStaff office in Thousand Oaks, and then he opened up a second office in Oxnard nearby in 2017. He's got a wide variety of experience and background in marketing, sales, management, really focused on bringing the right people to the table for owners to develop strong teams. He's got a very interesting background in that he was born in Africa to Dutch parents. He's worked in Asia, Europe, the United States with such companies as Belkin and Philips. So, Daan, welcome to the podcast. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today.
Thanks for having me, Joe. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
So, we're in an environment, obviously, the last couple of years here with COVID, and, we hear it in a lot of industries. Your specialty is in recruitment and talent in sort of the HR world. One of the things I consistently hear from other business owners, from professional friends of mine and other professions, it's so challenging to find good people. Why do you think that is?
Well, a lot of people think it's pure because of COVID, but actually there were some trends already going on before COVID that are kind of don't help us finding good people. So I think three major trends are combining. One is baby boomers are retiring at a fast pace. So baby boomers, basically everybody born from 49 to 64, they're retiring. And I think COVID accelerated the whole thing because for a lot of people, they realize they're worried about their health. They didn't like the remote work aspect. So about 2 million plus a year baby boomers are retiring. And they're not
2 million plus a year out of the labor force. Okay.
Correct. And those are people typically at the top of their game. So they typically are people in management positions. So they're a big loss to a company. Yeah. The second trend is that the birth rates have been declining since the 70s. So basically, in general, if the birth rate is less than 2.1%, the population is actually shrinking. And we're in that trend since several years. So we're actually shrinking as a population in America. And then on top of that, the labor participation rate is shrinking as well, from somewhat 61 plus to low 60s. It isn't a big difference, but on the numbers we have in America, all three things combined are basically saying there are just less people for the amount of jobs we have. Yeah. And I think there's kind of a sub-trend as well, where during COVID, particularly women were leaving the workforce at a higher pace than men. For many, many reasons. One of it's kids weren't vaccinated, they had to stay at home. Somebody had to take care of kids, and unfortunately, in many cases, that was the wife or the women in the workforce. So they have been. I have the numbers here between 2020 2021. So the first year of COVID, 2.4 million women left the workforce. Gosh. And it's still to be seen that they come back. So as a result, what you have now is that over the last numbers we have in May, there are about 12 million job openings and about 6 million people looking for jobs. So that's kind of almost a ratio 1 to 2 job seekers and open job orders.
So we've obviously got inflationary pressures, and now we've got even more fueling the fire on the wage pressure side, because you've got so many business owners and companies looking for the talent, and there's such a diminished supply. So from a owner's perspective, right, and company perspective, what can we be doing to reduce turnover and to really ensure that you keep your team happy?
Well, first of all, I want to highlight the cost of turnover, right? I think the cost of turnover it's the direct cost, which is depending on the position. I think the higher the position, the higher the cost, but typically the rule of thumb is about 6 to 12 months of annual salary is the cost of turnover.
Okay.
And that's a combination of recruitment cost, training cost, and loss of productivity. But there are a lot of hidden costs as well. Hidden costs like people, if it is a manufacturing environment, a lot of people do overtime and therefore get paid more because people are dropping out. There is things like you will see more mistakes because people are coming in, they are less trained. You see things like customer service levels are going down because more demand on less people. And I think there's also, it's almost like a snowball effect that if there's a high turnover in a company, you have more people asking themselves, what
it's
should
got
I
to
do the
affect the
same?
culture, right? It's got to affect the culture, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So people are asking, well, why is Johnny leaving? Should I be leaving as well?
Sure.
And
Should I be looking
let's
elsewhere?
start
What's going
questioning
on?
ourselves. And so it is in general, it's turnover is very bad for culture, very bad for overall morale, and it's kind of a snowball effect if you don't stop it in time.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is there's obviously the direct, quantitative costs that we can measure very easily, and then there's these also qualitative measures that will ultimately affect revenue and productivity, and you'll see them filter into the numbers, but perhaps maybe not immediately, but over time. So to that, to that end, I mean, what are some of the things that you coach or I guess encourage your clients to do to mitigate that turnover?
Well, that's actually some good news, right? So what I'm seeing is a clear shift where for change, I think smaller companies, medium-sized companies have a benefit. So a lot of new, younger employees are really looking for companies with a soul and a heart. So if they are kind of shying away from the big corporations where you're just a number, and I think smaller and medium-sized companies have an amazing opportunity to actually to offer not just an office but also a work environment where they realize that if people are spending 8 or 10 hours of their day at the office or in a work environment, they better make it worth it. So I think start even at onboarding, right? At onboarding, when people start their first job, it used to be here's your phone, here's your computer, good luck,
get to work.
good work. What you're seeing now, what's also being expected from a younger generation is you're sitting down with your manager and they expect to learn about the culture and the values. What does the company stand for? Things like what a younger generation also is looking for is a clear roadmap and a path to how they can grow within a company.
A clear career path to the next level.
Correct.
Sure.
So they expect some kind of training program, or if I do this, then I get that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of what's in it for me, right? So a lot of employees are realizing, I'm not just an employee for you. I also want to grow myself. I mean, what if I spend this much time in an office in a job environment? Why would I do that? And then little things like, I wanted to mention this one. Like the days of once a year performance appraisals are absolutely over.
Oh yeah,
a younger generation expect like immediate feedback. They expect their direct manager to come to them. It's like, hey, this was good, this wasn't good, and don't wait for half a year before you get your big performance review.
I mean, I think it speaks to the fact that we live in a world where we have instant gratification on our phones, emails. I mean, it's just sort of how we live our lives, and it permeates from sort of the personal realm, obviously, into the workforce. One of the things I'll mention, Daan, that we do here at our firm that we started a couple of years ago is a mentor-mentee program where every 6 months people are being paired. Those who've been here a little bit longer, Morton, with some of the newer staff, and it's across different departments, right? So it's not just advisor to advisor, but it's incorporating the operations team and the trading team and the financial planning team, and really we're doing our best to, I think, adhere to what you're saying and recognizing the trends in the workforce. So wanted to throw that out there.
It's and the two things which are very positive as well. The younger generation, the Gen Z and the millennials, they're actually very open for feedback. So they've grown up with getting permanent feedback, either online, social media, what have you. So they're very, very open for just hearing it. Just tell it to me straight, right? Tell me what I should be doing different. Another thing, what really helps for attention is your values are no longer posters on a wall. People expect a company to have a particular stance in the society, what they stand for. Even things like volunteering, non-profit support. A company is expected to have a bigger role in society than just being an employer. So that can go as far as offering employees volunteer time off. Right? You can spend 2 days a year, for instance, on a non-profit of your choice, or anything along that spectrum is really, really appreciated by a younger workforce.
Yeah, well, and I think it speaks to one of the things that we did, and I think it kind of gets back to what you were saying about the company's purpose is being really clear on that. Hey, we exist for a reason beyond just making money, right? The days of that, it seems, have gone, certainly by the wayside. Where it's like, what is your mission to improve the world, right? And what do you stand for? And and then that permeates down to like, what's your personal why? And that was an exercise we went through from the CEO, literally through the entire organization, and we shared it at our annual holiday party back in December. Now, I will tell you, that was it was a tough exercise, but we were able to get through it. But I think it galvanized the company in a way that we felt was really productive. But excellent point to bring
it up. I think the moment you define your why as a company and as every single employee, that is like a red light, almost like a red thread for everything that you do. Like basically, you can every decision in your life, in your work, you can bring back to your why.
Filters through that lens. Yeah.
It's like your North Star. It's your guiding beacon to why you're doing it and what you should be doing.
Yeah. So as an owner, maybe we can pivot the conversation here too. As an owner, right? We've talked a little bit about the landscape and sort of how it's different now. Like, what should employers be looking for when hiring new employees?
I think the biggest change is a mentality change where it is less, I'm offering an opportunity to work for my company. You have to be more on the hunt for the employee. So basically what it means is you have to realize that the employee has choices and you're happy to get this employee. So as what it basically means for me is that I always advise employers to put themselves in the shoes of the employee.
Have some empathy.
and basically think, what's in it for me? And if you take that position, it's easier to kind of realize that what are they looking for? What is that what we're offering? There are several other things as well. Like that permeates also into how do you do your job, or how do you do your job advertising, right? You cannot just post it on one medium or one platform and hope that it actually works.
Okay.
It also means that you go multiple platform. You make sure that your online presence as a company is in perfect order, right? I mean, your website better be good.
It's like table stakes these days, right?
Yeah, right. And people will check Glassdoor. People will check you out on YouTube. People will check you out on social media. And if things are not consistent or people feel like the values that you advertise on your About Us page are not true, not real, then they just switch off.
Yeah.
What to also be successful in recruiting is speed is everything, right? Gone are the days where people say, well, you have an interview with Joe first, and then 2 weeks later you're going to have an interview with the next level, and then the HR will speak to you the week after. No, the whole process has to be taking place in 1 week, because it's very simple. The best candidates have multiple suitors, so the best candidates will have multiple companies going after them.
Yeah.
And if you're not fast and not enticing, they will be gone.
So how do you, that brings up an interesting point though. How do you balance the speed in the marketplace? And I get that, right? But not rushing into a hire that ultimately, like we talked about, that cost of turnover. And let's just hypothetically say, this person's, looks like great on paper, but 6 months later, it's like you realize you hired too quickly, right? You could certainly fall into that trap. So how does one navigate balancing those two different priorities?
So I think part of it is preparation. If you before you even go out there and try to find candidates, people have a tendency, if they put a job order together, a job opening, and you give them a bullet list, they keep writing bullets, right? They basically just keep adding stuff.
Keep adding.
And I always tell my clients, I want you to separate what you like to have and what you must have. So there is a
needs versus wants.
Yeah, these are like the must-haves.
Yeah.
And I challenge a lot of people if they say, well, this person must have a bachelor or must have a master's or must have a particular certification. Is that really true, right? If you are a fairly junior position, isn't it better to hire a person and teach the person on the job and therefore create a better fit in your company? Or do you want to have somebody just because it's common that must have a bachelor or a degree?
Yeah.
So I think that's not the case. I also so be flexible what you really adamant what they should have. And I always advise people, look for the non-obvious ones, right? Like don't forget about the veterans. The veterans are a great group of employees that have worked in a very systematic, disciplined environment, that are great with typically with use of technology, with greater communication. So a lot of values that a lot of companies are looking for. When you look at stay-at-home moms, they probably look for more flexibility in timing, but they're willing and they're eager to show their skill set and what have you. And even people that have retired, I just mentioned in the beginning, about 2 million people retiring and baby boomers. But a lot of them are still very eager to kind of share their best practices and have like a coaching role, even as a part-time role. So another trick is to kind of really look outside the typical pool of candidates you would be looking for.
Well, it sounds like what you're saying is being thoughtful and questioning, hey, is just because it was done this way in the past doesn't mean it has to be that way going forward. And then also being thoughtful to perhaps thinking outside the box, like you were saying, if flexibility is really important, maybe there's a talent pool that we can leverage that flexibility to attract those kind of individuals who would be good for our company, meet their needs, and it's a win-win all the way around.
Sorry, Joe, you asked indeed, like I wasn't answering the question, I realized. So that's the preparation side of it. I think during the process of hiring and recruiting, it's very simple. The more prepared you are, the faster you can move.
Sure.
And I would basically, it comes down to really simple things. Like, I mean, if there is in the first interview with Joe, make sure that the second interview is lined up right after. And have a common understanding between you and the company management, what the pass and no pass criteria are, what are the success factors you're looking for, so you can actually make a very quick decision.
So it's being prepared, like you're saying, but also having your process really clearly defined so you can move through it rather quickly and methodically to stay competitive with the market landscape.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Good. In terms of, what are you seeing right now in terms of company policy? This is a little bit of a specific question, but obviously with COVID, this whole hybrid environment, it seems like the pendulum swung really far. I know obviously during COVID, it was like everybody was working from home. Oh, we're never going to need offices anymore. This is the way of the future. And then over the last 6-ish months, it seems like, big companies, small companies are really trying to get people back into the office. So pendulum kind of swung back that way. But it seems like the reality is it's somewhere in between, where some of the employees and staff really do still like the hybrid model. Give us your thoughts on what you're seeing out in the workforce now.
I think the biggest word here is flexibility. I think we should all realize that no two employees are the same, right? There are people that are really good in working remote and are super disciplined and methodical, and probably because they work from home, they have no distraction, they work better than ever.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also the personality that just needs the vibe of the office and the energy of an office or a work environment to just get going, and maybe somebody that wants to separate private life and business, and works better in that. So as an employer, what you must have going forward is offering the flexibility to work from home and have a hybrid combination, and be very open for if people asking for a day off or a day work from home, give it to them. I think what COVID did teach a lot of companies that people, if the fact that people are not productive and get lazy when they work from home is a myth. I think a lot of companies learn how to measure productivity and measure attendance while people work from home. So as always, the solution is somewhere in the middle, Joe. I think as an employer, just be flexible and open to request for work from home. In my case, my staff, There are people on my staff that love work in the office, that like the energy, and there are people that ask for like one day off and work from home.
Yeah. No, it's definitely an interesting dynamic that I think a lot of companies are still trying to figure out. It'll be interesting to see where we are a year, 2, 3 years from now, and what trends sort of emerge from it as well.
It also means, Joe, I think as a company, I think we learned it the hard way during COVID. As an employer, we have to think more creatively how we measure success and how we measure output, right?
Yeah, no, I think you actually touch on something which is really interesting, is that how you're measuring success and performance in your outcome and key results that you want, redefining those as well. I would wholeheartedly agree with you. Well, we call this a Ripcord moment because I firmly believe when an owner goes to sell their business, it's like jumping out of a plane. Their parachute can't fail. You've got to make sure that ripcord is intact, and they're flooded with all kinds of emotions, elation, fear, the adrenaline's going. And so I always ask our guests for 2 action items that an owner should do sooner than later if they're going to contemplate selling their business. And obviously, I actually believe, and I think you probably would agree, that the human capital element of a business, right? And at the end of the day, a company is just made up of the caliber of people that you have in the company. And so you can only take a company as far as the talent, the leadership, the management within that company can go with the people. And so what would you suggest to an owner who's contemplating some sort of succession event, whether it's an internal transition, a sale to a third party, maybe a management change to their family? What are a couple of action items that an owner should do sooner than later if they're going to go through some sort of succession event?
Well, a lot of HR mistakes have a very high liability, right? So so I would definitely recommend doing some kind of HR audit where, depending on the company that you are, but let's say if you're a manufacturing company, you definitely want to make sure that that all your OSHA certification and all your workers' comp certification and all your history is taken care of. If it is an office environment, that is less relevant, I would say, because there's less exposure, there's less risk attached to it. But
let me just jump in here real quick on that, because I think you bring up a really good point. Should I be bringing in, an outside audit? I mean, how do we go about doing that? Or is there a firm that we have that audits us? Do we get our corporate attorney to come in and make sure that all of our legal documents are buttoned up on the HR side? How do we do that?
I would recommend to hire an HR firm. You have like an HR consultant to basically do like almost like a 360 audit.
Okay.
If it is an employment lawyer, they will have, I think, too narrow of a scope for. It's more like the legal liability. An HR firm can also look a little bit at the culture and like the softer aspects of the HR status. Secondly, I would strongly recommend that no buyer wants to buy a company when the workforce isn't stable. So I think a lot of underlying issues must be sorted out before you leave or you pull the ripcord, right? So basically meaning if there is a simmering fire that people are frustrated about not being promoted, or drama or issues, you better make sure that's all sorted out before you kind of leave, because when you're no longer there, especially as a smaller company where people attach to the manager, the owner, and they really feel like they're part of a family, if certainly the head of the family leaves, a lot of these things can erupt and basically disrupt the company that you leave behind, and you don't want to do that.
Okay. So making sure that as best as you can that there are no fires with your personnel, and that certainly makes a lot of sense. So
there are no bodies in the closet anywhere now.
Yeah, there's no grenades that are going to blow up.
No.
Well, Daan, it's been great having the conversation with you. If somebody in our audience want to get a hold of you, how might they go about doing that?
They can email me at drenssen. It's the first letter of my first name, my last name, drenssen@pridestaff.com. They're always free to call my cell phone, which is 310-800-6846. If I don't pick up, I'm either sleeping or I will call you back. And last but not least, it's please check our website, staffing1000oaks.com. And it was such a pleasure, Joe. Thank you so much for the invite.
Well, Daan, thank you for your time, your expertise, and we really appreciate being on the Ripcord Moment. We're going to go ahead and sign off. So this is Joe C2 again from the Ripcord Moment, and we'll catch you next time.